At exactly 5:36 p.m. on March 27, 1964, the ground beneath Alaska began to move. Not for 10 seconds, not for 30. For more than 4 terrifying minutes, the Earth refused to stop. Entire neighborhoods cracked apart. Streets folded like paper. Massive buildings swayed until they collapsed into clouds of dust. Along the coastline, the ocean suddenly pulled away from the land, exposing the seafloor for hundreds of meters. People ran toward it. They had no idea they were running toward one of the deadliest tsunamis in American history. More than 800 miles away, clocks stopped, mountains collapsed, and fishing villages vanished almost without warning. Some survivors believed nuclear war had begun. Others thought the end of the world had arrived. When the shaking finally stopped, Alaska would never look the same again, and scientists would discover something beneath the Pacific Ocean that changed our understanding of earthquakes forever. This is Dark Atlas. If you enjoy true stories about hidden history, engineering disasters, forgotten catastrophes, and the incredible events that shaped our world, consider subscribing to Dark Atlas. Leave a like if you enjoy the documentary, and share your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. On the evening of Good Friday, March 27, 1964, Alaska felt unusually peaceful. Schools were closed for the holiday. Families were preparing dinner. Children played outside while fishermen returned to harbor before sunset. In Anchorage, the state's largest city, people were finishing work and looking forward to a quiet holiday weekend. Few realized they were living above one of the most dangerous geological boundaries on Earth. Far beneath Prince William Sound, 2 enormous tectonic plates had been locked together for centuries. The immense Pacific Plate was slowly forcing its way beneath the North American Plate, building pressure so gradually that no human could feel it. Year after year, decade after decade, the Earth bent silently under an unimaginable force. By 1964, that hidden pressure had reached its limit. At 5:36 p.m., without warning, the fault ruptured. In a matter of seconds, nearly 600 miles of Earth's crust tore apart. Some parts of the seafloor lurched upward by more than 30 feet, while others dropped dramatically, permanently reshaping Alaska's coastline. The shaking was unlike anything residents had ever experienced. Windows exploded, roads split open, power lines snapped overhead. Inside homes, furniture slid violently across rooms as walls twisted and ceilings began to collapse. People tried to stand, but the ground beneath them had become a moving wave. For the next 4 minutes and 38 seconds, Alaska endured the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in United States history. But the violent shaking was only the beginning, because far out in Prince William Sound, the ocean itself had just begun to move. The first tsunami didn't come from the open ocean. It came from the land itself. As the violent shaking continued, entire sections of Alaska's coastline suddenly gave way. Towering cliffs collapsed into narrow bays, forcing millions of tons of rock and soil into the sea. The displaced water exploded upward, creating towering local tsunamis that struck nearby communities within seconds. There was no warning, no sirens, no time to escape. In the tiny native village of Cheniga, families had barely recovered from the earthquake when a wall of water estimated at more than 90 feet high raced toward the shoreline. Some residents ran uphill, others froze in disbelief. Among them was Penny Mead, a young girl whose family desperately tried to outrun the wave. Within moments, the tsunami swallowed homes, boats, and people alike. Nearly a quarter of Cheniga's population disappeared that evening, leaving behind only silence and shattered foundations. Dozens of miles away, the disaster was unfolding in a completely different way. In Anchorage, the city wasn't being destroyed by water. It was collapsing beneath its own weight. One of the most devastating locations was Turnagain Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood built on unstable clay. As the ground shook, the soil suddenly lost all of its strength. Entire blocks began sliding toward the sea as if they were floating on liquid. Houses cracked apart. Streets folded into deep trenches. Backyards vanished into enormous chasms. Survivors later described watching the land move like slow ocean waves beneath their feet. One resident, Bruce Taggart, was thrown violently to the ground. As the earth ripped apart beneath him, one of his socks became trapped inside a crack in the pavement. Years later, he would recall that he escaped, but his sock never did. Only a few miles away, another tragedy was unfolding at Anchorage's famous 4th Avenue. Without warning, the busy commercial street simply gave way. A massive section of downtown slid into the unstable ground below, carrying cars, buildings, and terrified people with it. Concrete storefronts crumbled as clouds of dust filled the air. Utility poles twisted like matchsticks while shattered roads disappeared into deep fissures that permanently scarred the city. Then came the ports. In Valdez, one of Alaska's busiest harbors, workers watched in horror as the docks suddenly collapsed into the sea. The underwater landslide generated another devastating tsunami that raced back toward the shoreline, destroying ships and sweeping people into the freezing water. Some never resurfaced. As darkness fell across Alaska, emergency communications failed. Roads were impassable. Entire communities had vanished from contact. Across the state, survivors searched through rubble using flashlights and their bare hands, desperately calling the names of loved ones who never answered. But the nightmare was no longer confined to Alaska. Far out across the Pacific, an invisible series of waves had begun racing toward the coast at nearly 500 miles per hour. And the deadliest chapter of the disaster hadn't even arrived yet. While rescue teams searched through the ruins of Alaska, the disaster was racing across the Pacific. Unlike the towering local tsunamis that struck within minutes, these waves traveled silently across the ocean at nearly 500 miles per hour. Thousands of people living along the west coast of North America had no idea they were approaching. More than 4 hours later, the waves reached Crescent City, California. The first wave caused little concern. So did the second. Many residents believed the danger had passed and returned to the waterfront to inspect the damage. Some even gathered on the harbor to watch the unusually restless sea. Then came the fourth wave. Without warning, a wall of water nearly 21 feet high surged into the harbor, smashing fishing boats together, ripping buildings from their foundations, and dragging cars into the ocean. Entire city blocks flooded within minutes. By the time the water finally retreated, 12 people had lost their lives, making Crescent City the deadliest location outside Alaska. Back in Alaska, the destruction was almost beyond comprehension. More than 130 people had been killed. Entire villages had vanished. Thousands were left homeless. Roads, bridges, ports, railways, and airports lay in ruins. The economic damage reached hundreds of millions of dollars, equivalent to several billions today. Yet amid the devastation, one discovery would forever change science. A young geologist named George Plafka was sent to investigate the disaster. Instead of focusing only on the collapsed buildings, he studied the coastline itself. What he found was extraordinary. Entire forests had suddenly dropped below sea level, leaving thousands of trees standing dead in salt water. Elsewhere, beaches had risen several meters into the air, exposing land that had been underwater for centuries. The earthquake had not simply shaken Alaska, it had reshaped the Earth itself. Plafka's evidence confirmed something many scientists had long suspected, but had struggled to prove, that enormous sections of Earth's crust could suddenly rupture along massive subduction zones, releasing unimaginable amounts of energy in what we now call a megathrust earthquake. His work transformed modern geology, and helped scientists better understand some of the most powerful earthquakes on our planet. Today, visitors can still walk through the haunting ghost forests of Alaska, where dead trees remain standing as silent witnesses to that terrible evening. The abandoned site of Old Valdez still overlooks the bay, while the scars across Anchorage's landscape remain visible more than 60 years later. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: the fault beneath southern Alaska never disappeared. The Pacific Plate is still pushing beneath North America. Every single day, millimeter by millimeter. The pressure is building once again. No one knows whether the next great rupture will happen in 50 years or tomorrow. The Great Alaska Earthquake wasn't just the most powerful earthquake in American history. It revealed how fragile our cities truly are, transformed our understanding of the planet beneath our feet, and reminded humanity that even the strongest civilizations exist at the mercy of forces we cannot control. Sometimes history isn't hidden in forgotten documents. Sometimes it's written across the landscape itself. This is Dark Atlas. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Dark Atlas, and share it with someone fascinated by history's greatest disasters and forgotten stories. Which historical event should we uncover next? Let us know in the comments below.